It was the era where the old smoothbore musket met the deadly accuracy of the rifled barrel. From sidearms to repeating carbines, here is every firearm that fueled the American Civil War. Starting off with rifles and muskets. Springfield M, 1816-1822. Born as a flintlock in a different era, many of these old soldiers were converted to percussion cap before the war. Outdated by most standards, but still deadly in the right hands. Springfield M, 1842. The last smoothbore musket the military ever ordered. What made it special was every single part could be swapped between rifles, a small detail that saved countless lives in the field. Springfield M, 1855. This one brought two big changes at once. It introduced the Maynard tape primer, and it was the very first standard-issue rifle designed to fire the devastating mini-ball. Springfield M, 1861. If one rifle defined the Union soldier, this was it. Reliable, hard-wearing, and produced by the hundreds of thousands. The backbone of the Northern war machine from start to finish. Up next, Springfield M, 1863. Think of it as the M, 1861 after a tune-up. The hammer and barrel got quiet improvements, and factories kept pushing them out. Over 700,000 were made before the guns finally went silent. Enfield Pattern, 1853. Shipped across the Atlantic in massive numbers, this British rifle ended up in the hands of soldiers on both sides. Its reputation for quality and long-range accuracy made it one of the most trusted guns of the war. The next one, Lorenz Rifle. When both sides needed guns fast, Austria answered the call. Quality was hit or miss depending on the batch, but sheer numbers mattered. It became the third most used rifle of the entire conflict. Richmond Rifle. The Confederacy built this one with machinery seized from a captured federal armory in Virginia. It tells the story of the South fighting to arm itself from scratch, making do with whatever it could take or build. Fayetteville Rifle. Crafted in North Carolina, these Southern-made rifles ran a little shorter than most, making them easier to handle in tight spots. Survivors are incredibly rare today, which makes every one a genuine treasure. Mississippi M, 1841. It earned its legendary nickname down in Mexico before the Civil War ever started. Soldiers loved it for its pinpoint accuracy and its distinctive, handsome profile. A rifle with real history behind it. Whitworth Rifle. Confederate sharpshooters guarded these jealously. The hexagonal bore gave it a precision that no other rifle could match. Officers on the other side knew that if a Whitworth was in the tree line, someone was already dead. Brunswick Rifle. An older European design that relied on a specific belted ball, which made reloading painfully slow. It was already behind the times when the war broke out, but it still showed up in the early fighting. Sharps Rifle. Loading from the breech instead of the muzzle meant a soldier could fire much faster than his opponent. Elite marksmen swore by it. Speed and power wrapped up in one exceptionally well-built package. Spencer Rifle. 7 shots before reloading. That was the promise, and the Spencer delivered every time. When soldiers armed with this stepped onto the field, the tactical math changed completely in their favor. Henry Rifle. 16 rounds without stopping to reload. Confederate soldiers had a saying for it. Load it on Sunday and fire it all week. The most advanced repeating rifle anyone had ever seen in combat. Hall Rifle. Long before breech loading became standard, the Hall was already doing it. Soldiers loaded from the back of the gun, instead of stuffing powder down the front. A genuinely forward-thinking design for its day. Tarpley Rifle. Rare does not even begin to cover it. Only a few hundred were ever produced for Confederate forces. Its side-swinging breech block was clever and unique, making surviving examples some of the most sought-after pieces in the hobby. Colt Revolving Rifle. It borrowed the rotating cylinder straight from the revolver playbook, giving it a serious rate of fire. The catch? All those chambers could go off at once. Soldiers respected its power, but quietly feared what it might do to their own hands. Let's move on to carbines. Spencer Carbine. 7 rounds, fast and reliable, in a package built for cavalry. When this carbine hit the battlefield, it rewrote what mounted soldiers could do. For many troopers, it was simply the best weapon they ever held. Sharps Carbine. Ask a Union cavalryman what he trusted most, and odds were good he pointed here. The falling block action was smooth and dependable, and the accuracy at range put most other carbines to shame. Burnside Carbine, named for the general who designed it before he ever became famous for his facial hair. Its cone-shaped brass cartridge was unlike anything else on the field, and it was issued in enormous numbers throughout the war. Next, Smith Carbine. Break it open in the middle like a shotgun, drop in a rubber or foil cartridge, snap it shut. For a cavalryman trying to reload at a gallop, that simplicity was worth everything. Up next, Maynard Carbine. The tape primer system worked just like a modern cap gun, advancing automatically with each shot. Light, easy to handle, and mild on recoil, it earned admirers from both the North and the South. Star Carbine. It never got the fame of the Spencer or the Sharps, but cavalry troopers who carried it found little to complain about. Solid, dependable, and built to survive the hard life of mounted service. Merrill Carbine. Traditional in feel, this is a standard muzzle-loading percussion rifle. Most of these ended up with cavalry units fighting out west in the Tennessee and Mississippi theaters. Gallagher Carbine. It had one persistent, frustrating problem. Fired casings liked to stick in the chamber. In the middle of a firefight, wrestling a spent casing free was the last thing any soldier wanted to deal with. Then, Jostling Carbine. A swing open breech made reloading fast and intuitive. It fired rimfire cartridges and held up well in rough conditions. Many were later converted to handle newer ammunition as the technology moved forward. Up next, Cosmopolitan Carbine, built in Ohio with practicality in mind. Fewer moving parts meant fewer things to break in the field. It never won beauty contests, but it showed up, worked hard, and kept soldiers alive. Gwynn and Campbell Carbine. Soldiers called it the grapevine because that oddly curving lever looked like something off a vine. The nickname stuck, but the gun outlasted the jokes. It was durable enough to stay in service right through to the end. Ball Carbine. A single-shot, breech-loading design, this one showed real promise as a late-war arrival. Only a small number made it to soldiers in the field before the shooting finally stopped. Palmer Carbine. History books rarely mention it, but the Palmer was a genuine first. The very first metallic cartridge firearm accepted by the US Army. It arrived just as the war ended, so the battlefield never got to know it. Lindner Carbine. A rotating sleeve sealed the chamber when fired, which was clever on paper. In practice, it remained rare, with most examples going to the 1st West Virginia Cavalry, and not many others seeing it at all. Wesson Carbine. The mechanism was elegant and the accuracy was remarkable. Some soldiers liked it so much they bought one with their own money, rather than wait for the army to issue one. Now this is the Tarpley Carbine, one of the very few breech-loading weapons the South actually manufactured itself. The side-swinging breech block was inventive, but limited resources kept production tiny, a symbol of Confederate ingenuity bumping up against hard reality. Moving on to handguns. Colt M 1849 Pocket. Never on any official issue list, yet thousands of soldiers tucked one of these into a coat pocket anyway. Small enough to hide, reliable enough to trust. Officers especially loved having a quiet backup close at hand. The next one, Colt M 1851 Navy. Lawmen, outlaws, generals, and enlisted men all wanted one of these. The 36 caliber round hit hard, the balance felt perfect, and the look was unmistakable. Few weapons became as synonymous with an entire era as this one. Colt M 1860 Army. The Union cavalry's go-to sidearm packed a 44 caliber punch into a frame lighter than anything that came before it. More than 100,000 were produced during the war years alone. Up next, Colt Dragoon. This one was a holdover from the frontier days, and its weight showed it. So heavy it rode in saddle holsters rather than a belt. The power was undeniable, but on foot it felt like carrying a small anvil. Remington M 1858 Army. That solid top strap across the frame made it noticeably stronger than the open-top Colts. It could take a beating and keep firing. It was a reliable sidearm, though reloading required the time-consuming process of reloading individual chambers. Remington Navy, the smaller, lighter sibling to the Army model. Same rugged, solid frame, same dependable reputation, just chambered in 36 caliber. Sailors and soldiers alike found a lot to like about this one. Star Revolver. While most revolvers needed a deliberate cock before each shot, the Star's double action let the trigger do all the work. Complex to build, but fast in a fight. The Union ranked it third in total revolvers purchased. Up next, LeMat revolver, 9 revolver chambers arranged around a secondary shotgun barrel hidden underneath. Confederate officers adored it because when things got desperate, that shotgun barrel changed the conversation entirely. Nothing else offered that kind of firepower in one hand. Next, Kerr revolver. Smuggled through the Union naval blockade from Britain, this revolver had a rugged internal lock that almost never failed. Most ended up with Confederate cavalry, where its reliability made it a trusted companion in a hard war. Tranter revolver. Another import from Britain, this one prized for its smooth trigger and beautiful craftsmanship. Officers who could afford to choose their own sidearm often chose this one. It felt like a quality instrument in every sense. Beaumont Adams revolver. British engineers cracked the double-action puzzle years before most American makers did. Pull the trigger, and it cocked and fired in one motion. That extra speed in a close-range scrap was worth a great deal. Next, Spiller and Burr revolver. The Confederacy needed sidearms and could not get enough steel, so this one used a brass frame instead. It was a deliberate copy of the Whitney design. Not as strong as iron, but it kept Southern soldiers armed when nothing else could. Griswold and Gunnison revolver, made in Georgia. This was the most common handgun produced anywhere in the South. The brass frame gave it that distinctive yellowish tint. Tens of thousands were turned out to fill the desperate gap in Confederate sidearm supplies. Dance and Brothers revolver, deep in Texas. The Dance brothers built these with a flat-sided frame, which gave them a look unlike any other revolver of the war. Rugged and straightforward, just like the men who carried them. Then, Whitney revolver. That closed-top frame made it tougher than many of its competitors. Union soldiers trusted it because it could absorb punishment and keep functioning. The solid, no-nonsense design influenced plenty of other makers who followed. Savage M, 1861 Navy. 2 triggers, and each one did something different. The lower ring cocked the hammer, then the upper trigger fired the shot. Strange looking, yes, but in a chaotic boarding action, that 2-step system let a sailor fire very fast indeed. Le Faucheur M, 1858. France shipped this one over, along with a new idea, the pinfire cartridge. No loose powder, no separate cap, just load and go. Both sides bought them by the thousands, and it was one of the easier guns to keep fed in the field. The next one, Walch revolver. 6 chambers, but each one held 2 charges stacked on top of each other, giving a soldier 12 shots before reloading. Loading it carefully required patience and focus. Having 12 rounds ready to fire more than rewarded the effort. Next, Moore revolver. Patent law blocked most makers from selling metallic cartridge revolvers, so Moore found a workaround. Load from the front of the cylinder using a special teat fire round. Clever legal thinking wrapped around a perfectly functional pistol. The next one, Volcanic pistol, a lever-action handgun that fired a self-contained rocket ball, years before modern cartridges caught on. Stopping power was modest, but the ideas inside it led directly to the famous lever-action rifles that came next. Elgin Cutlass pistol. 1 barrel, 1 shot, and then a massive Bowie knife ready to go if that shot missed. Designed for brutal, close-quarters fighting at sea. Intimidating does not quite capture how it looked in the hands of a determined sailor. Aston M, 1842 pistol. The last single-shot smoothbore pistol the US military ever ordered. Percussion cap, 1 round, carried in saddle holsters by cavalrymen who hoped they would never need it more than once. Let's move on to machine guns and volley guns. Gatling gun. Hand crank it, and 10 rotating barrels start cycling, one firing while the others cool. Nothing like it had ever appeared on a battlefield before. It saw limited use in this war, but anyone standing in front of it understood the future had arrived. Agar gun. Soldiers called it the coffee mill because of the hand crank sitting on top. Rounds fed from a hopper straight into a single barrel. President Lincoln personally championed it. Overheating was its weakness, but the concept was genuinely ahead of its time. Williams gun. One of the few rapid-fire weapons actually built for the Confederacy. Technically a small breech-loading cannon, it could lay down fire quickly, but the heat built up fast and the mechanism jammed after only a few minutes of hard use. Vandenberg volley gun. Dozens of barrels bundled into one enormous weapon, all firing at once or in rapid succession. The wall of lead it produced was devastating. But it weighed a tremendous amount, and reloading took so long, it was only useful sitting still. Requa battery gun. 25 barrels on a two-wheeled frame, all going off together in one thunderous volley. The spread it produced was terrifying. Reloading all those barrels in the middle of a battle, however, was an absolute nightmare for the crew. Then, Gorgas machine gun, a Confederate experiment built around a hand-cranked, revolving copper disc. The thinking was sound and the ambition was real, but with the South struggling for every resource, this innovative weapon never made it past the prototype stage. Next on the list is Sabers and Swords. M1832 foot artillery sword. Modelled after the Roman gladius and issued to artillerymen who rarely used it for fighting. In practice, it hacked through brush, dug into earth, and cleared obstacles. A tool that wore a sword's clothes but lived a labourer's life. M1840 heavy cavalry sabre. The troops had a name for it: Old Wristbreaker. The long, curved blade was designed for devastating mounted slashes, but the sheer weight of the thing wore soldiers down. Effective, brutal, and demanding on whoever swung it. M1840 light artillery sabre. Shorter and quicker than the heavy cavalry version, this one was built for artillerymen who needed to move fast. Its main job was giving gun crews a fighting chance if enemy infantry ever overran their position. M1840 NCO sword. The sergeants and corporals who carried this straight-bladed sword rarely drew it in anger. It was a badge of rank more than a battlefield weapon. A visible symbol that helped these leaders hold their men together under fire. Up next, M1840 musician's sword. Drummers and buglers carried this slim blade not to fight, but to mark their status on the field. With a distinct knucklebow handguard, it was decorative by nature. The men who wore it were some of the bravest on any battlefield. Now this is the M1850 foot officer's sword. Infantry officers drew this slightly curved blade when leading a charge. The etched decorations on the steel made it a proud thing to carry. It was a signal to the men behind it: follow me forward. M1850 staff and field sword. Majors, colonels, and the men who commanded them carried this ornate weapon. Those decorative cutouts in the brass guard told everyone nearby that the person holding it carried serious responsibility on their shoulders. M1852 naval officer's sword. Elegant enough for a dress uniform, practical enough for a ship's deck. Both Union and Confederate naval officers carried this blade with pride. The design left such a lasting impression, it is still part of naval tradition today. Up next, M1860 light cavalry sabre. Engineers stripped out the excess weight that made the older sabres so tiring to wield. The result was a beautifully balanced blade that swung freely in a fast-moving horse charge. One of the most iconic cavalry weapons of the 19th century. M1860 naval cutlass. Short, heavy, and built for the chaos of a boarding action where there was no room to swing anything longer. The big brass basket guard kept fingers attached during a blade-on-blade fight on a pitching deck. Enfield pattern 1822 sword. Officers on both sides ordered this British blade with their own money because they wanted something they could rely on. That reinforced pipe-back spine made it exceptionally strong, and its reputation travelled far ahead of it. Enfield pattern 1853 sabre. The standard-issue sword of the British cavalry crossed the Atlantic in large numbers. The three-bar hilt and high-quality steel impressed American cavalrymen who received them. A dependable blade from a country that knew how to make them. Confederate cavalry sabre. With steel and skilled labour both running short, Southern sabre makers cut corners where they had to. The finish was rough and the polish was often missing. But in a cavalry charge, a sharp edge does not care how pretty the blade looks. Then Confederate artillery short sword, another blade inspired by ancient Rome and mostly ignored in actual combat. Artillerymen used it to chop brush and break ground rather than fight. Too heavy and too awkward to be useful when things got close and violent. Confederate foot officer's sword. It announced rank and authority at a glance. The slight curve in the blade handled both cutting and thrusting duties. Quality ranged widely depending on who made it and what materials were available that particular week in the South. Continuing with bayonets. M1841 sabre bayonet. Designed specifically for the Mississippi rifle, This massive blade could stand alone as a short sword when needed. Attaching it to the muzzle added impressive reach, but shifted the weight forward and made accurate aiming a real struggle. M1842 Socket Bayonet. A simple triangular spike slipped over the muzzle of a smoothbore musket. Soldiers advancing with these fixed sent a clear message. The three-sided shape was no accident. Wounds it left behind were notoriously difficult to close. M1855 Saber Bayonet. That long, recurved blade gave infantrymen with shorter rifles some extra reach in a push. It looked formidable on the end of a gun. The trade-off was a front-heavy weapon that tired the arms and fought back against steady aim. M1855 Socket Bayonet. The standard attachment for the Springfield rifle. A locking ring kept it from rattling loose at the worst possible moment. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Just reliable steel that added lethal reach when the ammunition ran dry. Up next, M1861 Saber Bayonet. Navy crews and specialized infantry units carried this long, heavy blade into action. It was substantial enough to function as a short sword on its own, giving sailors a fighting option long after a single shot pistol had been spent. P1853 Socket Bayonet. Made to fit the famous Enfield rifle, this British import locked on tight and held firm under hard use. Both sides brought thousands of these over throughout the war. A trustworthy piece of steel with a solid reputation on 2 continents. Sharp's Saber Bayonet. The elegant curve gave this long blade a graceful look that stood apart from plainer designs. It paired with the famous breech-loading rifle shown above it. Many soldiers quietly preferred the lighter alternatives because lugging this one around all day took a real toll. Spencer Socket Bayonet. Attach a traditional spike bayonet to the most advanced repeating rifle on the battlefield, and you covered every distance. When the last round in the magazine was gone, cold steel was still ready. A practical insurance policy for the modern soldier. Lorenz Socket Bayonet. Imported from Austria, along with the rifle it was made for. That distinctive helical slot twisted onto the barrel and locked it securely in place. Rugged and well made, it held up through the hardest campaigns of the war. Brunswick Sword Bayonet. A heavy European blade with a brass handle that looked like it belonged in a different century. Rare on American soil, which made it a curiosity among soldiers who spotted one. Formidable enough to use as a standalone sword in a pinch. Hall Socket Bayonet. Made to fit one of the earliest breech-loading rifles in American service. A classic spike design from an older tradition. As the war progressed and better weapons arrived, this one quietly faded from the front lines. Finally, we have knives. Bowie knife. More soldiers carried a personal Bowie from home than any other private weapon. It was the blade everyone knew by name. When the fighting went hand to hand and there was no time left for anything else, this one settled arguments fast. The next one, D-Guard Bowie. Confederate soldiers took to this one immediately. That sweeping iron guard around the grip kept fingers safe when blades locked together. Heavy and long, it was equally at home clearing brush in camp or deciding a close quarters fight. The next one, Arkansas Toothpick. No chopping, no slashing. This double-edged dagger was designed purely for thrusting, and the long needle point made that purpose clear at a glance. When the fighting collapsed into something desperate and personal, men reached for this. Ames Rifleman's Knife. The first knife ever officially issued to the United States Army. The thick blade, solid brass guard, and imposing overall length made it feel closer to a short sword than a camp tool. It meant business from the first moment you picked it up. Sheffield Fighting Knife, Sheffield Steel, had a reputation on both sides of the Atlantic, and soldiers knew it. These British-made blades held an edge longer and cut cleaner than most American alternatives. Having one meant you had the finest cutting tool the era could offer. Dirk, Scottish in origin, and carried in America by officers who appreciated its slender, elegant profile. Easy to conceal, easy to draw quickly. A status symbol for those who wore it openly, and a hidden insurance policy for those who did not.